Yo, that's the war racket. It's the war racket. It's the war racket. It's the war racket. You twisters of language. You creeps of disguise. Yeah, disinformation. It's like worms in your eyes. You privileged bankers. You gambler thieves.
Good morning and welcome to Heroes and Patriots, a program about national security, intelligence, and foreign policy. Today is Thursday, June 3rd, 2021, and we are streaming live from the studios of KMUD Community Radio in Northern California. Thanks for tuning in. I'm Mary Massey, and with me is co-host John Sakowicz, who I hear is having a birthday and has something to say about that. Good morning, John.
Thank you, Mary. And yes, today's my birthday. Absolutely. And I want our listeners to give me a birthday gift. If you go to my Facebook page, John Sakowicz, Sakowicz, you'll see that John's birthday fundraiser is for KMUD Radio.
Yay!
Wow, thank you, John. Happy birthday.
Thank you. We've already raised a couple $100, and that's what I want for my birthday. I asked my brothers and sisters. I've asked my friends. Now I'm asking my 5,000 Facebook friends and our listeners here at KMUD Radio to please become a member. You can do that directly, of course, at the station by clicking on Becoming a Member button, or just by going to my Facebook page, John Sakowicz, and just doing the whole PayPal thing as a fundraiser for KMUD. I want to just also note that I share a birthday with two very extraordinary people. One was Allen Ginsberg, who I actually kissed on his birthday out of just sheer love for the man.
Oh, wow. Yeah, you being poet.
and I was a lot younger. And he was gay, and I think I think he enjoyed it.
You floated his boat.
It's not every stranger I can kiss. But the other birthday I share is with Josephine Baker. Josephine Baker, of course, was the famous cabaret dancer, made famous by dancing in just a skirt of bananas in Paris. But what a lot of people don't know is that she was a spy in France for the Allies. And just as importantly, she was a civil rights activist. Baker supported the American civil rights movement during the 1950s and 60s, even though she was mostly abroad and living in Paris. But when she was in the United States, she refused to perform in segregated audiences. And in 1963, she spoke at the March on Washington right alongside of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Josephine Baker, happy birthday.
Yeah, terrific. Well, we're going to carry on, and we hope that you will receive many birthday gifts to KMUD during this hour and beyond. Today's show and all programs will be archived here at KMUD and at our show website, heroespatriots.org. We invite you as listeners to call in with questions for our guests, 707-923-3911. We will take as many as time permits, and we ask that you be brief. And our thanks again today to our wonderful engineer, Dorothy Sakur, for assisting with the production of today's program. We're going to begin the show. We have our first guest on the line, Christopher W. Shaw. Christopher Shaw is a historian and author of the book Preserving the People's Post Office. And leading up to the 2020 presidential election, the Washington Post published his article, The U S Postal Service Was Designed to Serve Democracy. That's an interesting concept. The 2020 election could depend on its success. So we will now welcome first-time guest, Christopher Shaw. Christopher, are you with us?
Good morning. I'm here. Glad to be here. Glad to be with you.
Hooray! I know you're in California as we are, and we thank you for joining us.
Good to be here, and good to be here in California.
Wonderful.
Mr. Shaw, I thought I'd get in the first question since I'm the birthday boy, and that question is, it's really, I read your editorial in the Washington Post back when Congress was having hearings on the post office during the Trump administration, and maybe how the Trump administration was interfering with the mailing of ballots. But before we get to that aspect of the post office, you wrote that the post office is an essential public service, and here we have a show on national security, and really the U S Postal Service is crucial, is central to our democracy. You offer mail. You're part of the fabric that binds the nation together, and the post office has done that for more than 2 centuries, connecting every corner of the United States, no matter how remote. And keep in mind, we're speaking to you from remote locations right now. Me and Mary in Mendocino County, and KMUD in Humboldt County. And by connecting every corner of the United States, it's crucial to keeping the democracy together. It provides a crucial lifeline for low-income Americans and residents of rural areas who would not be able to afford delivery service. Post offices are centers of community life and local identity, and special postage rates for news and nonprofit organizations facilitate democracy and the public interest by supporting the free press. Please just expound on that a little, if you will.
Well, I think you've covered a lot of the points pretty well there, and the fact is that the U S Postal Service is also an example of democracy in our daily lives, just by the fact that it serves everybody on a universal basis. It serves everybody in a uniform manner, so we all receive the same service. And then, as you were saying, there's also the important role in vote-by-mail elections, with the 2020 election being a great example, because due to COVID, people wanted to maintain that physical distance. So instead of going to the polling place, they would mail in their ballots, and you saw vote by mail double, and around half of all voters cast their ballot that way. So that's an important aspect of the Postal Service, and one that people hadn't imagined would have been the case just a few months earlier, before the pandemic hit. And then you also have the ways in which it helps to disseminate information and news and make that widely available to people through newspapers and magazines having special reduced postage rates, and then also all the nonprofit organizations that play an important role in our society. They have a special rate that they use to fundraise and to send out their newsletters and inform people what they're up to and what they're doing. So there's all these ways in which we see the Postal Service operating in a democratic way, and also operating to support and promote democracy just by delivering the mail, 6 days a week, all year round. So the Postal Service is really a great example of democracy in the United States.
Right. And could you speak to the issue of Trump having the Postmaster General slowing down the mail so that he could win the election? I think I read some information about that leading up to the 2020 presidential election. How did he do that? I mean, how could he get the Postmaster General to do that?
Well, Trump obviously did not like the Postal Service, and he complained about it. He called it a joke, and he worked with his Treasury Secretary, Steve Mnuchin, who's really put in charge then of getting appointees made to the Postal Board of Governors. So the Board of Governors is the group that oversees the post office, and these members are appointed by the president and then confirmed by the Senate. And so they got enough members in there to have a majority who then selected the new Postmaster General, because that's one of the jobs of the members of the Board of Governors, is to pick the Postmaster General, and then the Postmaster General runs the post office on a day-to-day basis. And so that's how they ended up with Louis DeJoy. And then he came in there very interested in squeezing out costs, is the way that he put it. But that meant that there was really a major change in terms of staffing. And with COVID, you already had the Postal Service even more shorthanded than it already is, because it's really been very shorthanded for the past decade or so, just because the agency has not been hiring like it should. So you had a short staffing issue made even worse. And then specific new policies, such as not running mail trucks as often, meant that mail just wasn't moving like it should. And then there was also some interest in, the policies put in place that reduced the window hours at post offices and uprooted those blue mailboxes, the blue U.S. mailbox that we see on the corners. Yeah. So all these things happened all at once, and with the election approaching, obviously this was really worrisome. And so you really had an unprecedented situation where these changes were taken to court, and you had judges actually reversing these policies. And so the good news then is that when the ballots were being cast, virtually all ballots got back from voters to election officials within 7 days, and the average was 1.6 days. So the Postal Service did end up doing really a very effective job in terms of facilitating the election and making it happen through vote by mail. So that was the positive ending to what was really a very worrisome start of the tenure there of Louis DeJoy as the Postmaster General.
Lisa Graves wrote the article, "The Billionaire Behind the Efforts to Kill the U.S. Postal Service," about Charles Koch, the super conservative who funds a lot of the conservative super PACs. What was his particular beef with the Postal Service?
Well, Charles Koch is a major funder of lots of political organizations, think tanks, things like that. But the thing is that the sort of anti-post office campaign in this country is much longer lived and bigger than just Charles Koch. You really have the libertarian right wing does not like the idea of government services. They just want to remove government from our daily lives, and one of the ways in which they want to get government out of our daily lives is by privatizing, ultimately, the Postal Service. These people have an agenda where they would like to see the Postal Service become a for-profit corporation instead of a government public service. And so there's all these think tanks in Washington, D.C., the Cato Institute, the American Enterprise Institute, the Heritage Foundation, and others that have for decades been calling for privatization of the Postal Service. They publish books that make this call. They host conferences where people say why this would be a good idea. They submit op-eds to newspapers and on and on. And the reality here, though, is that the Postal Service would not operate on that universal, uniform, democratic basis as a democratic public service like we were discussing before if it were to be privatized, because you aren't going to find a for-profit business that's going to be interested in moving the mail from Alaska to Florida at anything like an affordable way, and with anything like the service levels that we traditionally are used to as Americans. So that is really a long-range campaign and goal to attack the Postal Service, and unfortunately it's been underway for decades. And one positive, actually, that came out of the whole postal crisis of 2020 with Louis DeJoy coming in to be Postmaster General is I do think it opened the eyes of a lot of Americans as to the vulnerability of the Postal Service to these kinds of attacks. So I think people are more aware now of the issue and are better prepared to push back against this kind of effort to privatize this essential public service.
It's 9:15 if you've just joined Heroes and Patriots. We are speaking with Christopher W. Shaw, who is the author of the book, Preserving the People's Post Office. If you would like to submit a question to him, please call 707-923-3911. Please be brief. We'd like to have as many people as possible speak to him. You've mentioned the effects of the post office delays and whatnot leading up to the presidential campaign. You know, around the country, there are many states that are looking at voter reform with respect to mail-in voting. Could you speak to the Biden administration, how he's examining that or improving upon that if he is? And what can we expect?
Well, there definitely was a campaign waged in 2020 on the Republican side to claim that vote by mail was a process that was highly susceptible to fraud and abuse, and to try to undermine confidence in vote by mail and the results that it would produce. And this was a very unfortunate development, and also really very much untrue. There just isn't evidence of vote by mail having a problem. So if you look at the past 20 years, there's around 250 million mail ballots had been cast prior to the 2020 election, and there were only 204 cases of vote fraud, and those had resulted in 141 criminal convictions. So really a very, very, very small issue here, almost a non-issue. And yet, so these claims were very inaccurate. But there is a certain belief, I think, amongst some people who defend this misinformation that this is actually a problem. And then there's also a certain cynicism at play as well here, too. And so you do see states trying to make it more difficult to vote by mail, reducing, drop boxes, things like that. And, the Biden administration and I think everybody in general is really going to have to look at these laws as they come out. They're going to look different because they're coming out of different states, but they need to be examined, and then the facts need to be presented, and a debate has to be had over this issue, because getting in the way and interfering with the ability of people to vote in this way is obviously a threat to our democracy. So, it's definitely an unfortunate development. I guess, we'll see more specifically what happens as this unfolds.
Mr. Shaw, in researching this show, members of our congressional delegation here in California gave me what was, for me, just unprecedented access to government. And what I learned was that the U S Postal Service is now, or wants to use in the very near future, blockchain. Blockchain, of course, is the same technology that enables cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin, but it also enables non-fungible tokens. And the U.S. Postal Service has a patent that states that the process of blockchain for them would mean that every registered voter receives a computer-readable code in the mail, confirms that voter's identity, and confirms the correct ballot information in an election. And I can go on and on about what various emoluments are in that policy, what token link QR codes are, what scannable paper is, et cetera. But the bottom line is that it looks like blockchain may be the future of the post office. Do you care to comment?
I'm not an expert on blockchain, and so this is news to me. I haven't heard too much about this. I guess I will say that I do wonder about moving in that direction too quickly, given the misinformation that's already out there, and making this sort of harder for people to understand and less tangible in that way. I worry that it could maybe potentially feed into that misinformation. So it seems you definitely would want a big push for education around any kind of efforts to move in that way, whereas terms of paper ballots, right, people understand, they see the ballot, they understand it goes in the envelope, they can understand it goes through the mail. So it's very clear how that operates and how that works, and I think it's easier in that case to, push back against misinformation here. But, that's an interesting development. I guess we'll all be staying tuned about that one.
Christopher Shaw, we have a caller. Caller, please be brief and go ahead with your question.
Yes. I'd like to return to the question of viability and privatization of the post office, and I might have missed this earlier. But I'm wondering, and the blockchain question prompted me to think about this, and along with democratization, democracy, what is the role of, is there a possibility that we could see Amazon taking over the post office with its vast resources and its dependence on mail services, or other competitors? And if you could come back to the privatization, I really worry about that taking over, and then the implications for voting and all of the public good that the post office plays.
Yeah, no, that's a question certainly that is on people's minds. Obviously, Amazon has recognized the postal network's reach in terms of getting things delivered and has made use of that. What we see right now is Amazon doing a big push to create its own delivery network. It's buying its own vans, and so it's really creating its own way to deliver its items. And it's not exactly clear where that will end. It may emerge as a sort of competitor to UPS and FedEx and these private companies as well. But regardless, the fact remains that the post office, because it's a government agency, because it operates on a nonprofit basis, because it adheres to these principles of universal service, it will deliver the mail, anywhere in this country. And these private companies just won't do that. There's places that they deliver to. They charge extra fees. There's some places that they don't deliver to. So rural America would really be hurt if we were to see any privatization take place. So it definitely would disrupt the ability of Americans to send and receive mail.
Chris, we have another caller for you. Caller, if you're listening, go ahead.
Hello, this is Jeff Wright on the Mendocino Coast. Thank you, John and Mary, for this program. It's always compelling. Chris Shaw, I'd like to ask you about postal money orders, if you're familiar with the former banking role that the post office had. Is it possible to bring that back? And basically on what you've been saying, is it possible to have Mr. Postmaster DeJoy, and boy, does he live down to his name, DeJoy, arrested for mail fraud and interfering with the U.S. mails and the efforts that he did to alter the election? And thank you again very much for this program.
Thank you, Jeff.
So in terms of DeJoy, it may be possible to have him removed as Postmaster General at the end of the year when we have another opening on the Board of Governors. So that could potentially happen. The banking issue, you raise an important point here, which is that the Postal Service operated a savings bank in the 20th century, or over 50 years, from 1911 until 1966. And I cover this extensively in my book called Money, Power, and the People, The American Struggle to Make Banking Democratic. And it really was a grassroots effort that led Americans to lobby and push to get a savings bank in the post office, where you could just walk in and put money into a savings account. And there's a lot of interest with 8 million households in this country that don't have any bank account and pay upwards of $17 billion a year in fees for basic banking services each year. And then also with literally thousands of areas where there are no banks in close proximity. To get a bank back in post offices again, there's 30,000 post offices. They're in all different towns, and because, again, the post office isn't interested in maximizing its profit, it could provide these kinds of services in an affordable way. So this would really be a way to bring millions of people into the banking system and keep them from getting ripped off by check cashing outlets and pawn shops and places like that, just to do basic things like checking, cashing a paycheck, for instance.
Right.
So there's a push right now in Congress to make this happen. It's an idea that has happened before in this country. It definitely could work again, and so they're trying to get a pilot program off the ground right now where 5 urban and 5 rural zip codes would provide some basic banking services. So, as you said, the money orders are already in place, the postal money orders. They sell around $20 billion worth of them every year, and it would be great to see just some other basic banking services join that already existing resource and have that in our post offices as well.
Yeah, that's a very astute point, and I was about to mention that. You beat me to the punch. That the U S Postal Service had a savings bank up until 1962, and they also do $20 billion a year in postal money orders. Again, in researching this show, one of the things that one of our congressional officers pointed out to me was that major banks such as Citibank are beginning to research and experiment with the U.S. Postal Service in a joint venture to provide new and more efficient services. Again, keeping in mind that blockchain already provides financial services, already provides identity services, already provides supply chain management and device management. So this is just another step in that direction, and that the U.S. Postal Service is already on board. Again, blockchain technology is a way to transfer any kind of data and information that is fast, tracked, and secure. And this seems to be the future of the post office.
Christopher Shaw, we need to say goodbye. It's 28 minutes past the hour. If folks are interested in gathering and organizing themselves to fight this, if you will, that is the People's Post Office, what might they do? And also, if you could give us a resource for how folks might find you.
Sure. The one resource on the web I would say that will really connect you to a lot of information on this is SaveThePostOffice.com. So I would suggest that. I have a website, too. It's ChrisWShaw.com. And I also have a book coming out on the Postal Service in November from City Lights Books, and it's called First Class, the U.S. Postal Service, Democracy, and the Corporate Threat. And it will be out, should be out in November. So that definitely will cover a lot of ground in terms of recent developments and the history as well.
Well, we'd very much like to have you back following or around that time. So pencil us in, and we'll look forward to having you back. Thank you so much for being our guest today. We're going to take a brief pause.
Thank you.